Hello, and welcome to Notes from the Oracle. I'm Connor, and together with Jack, my co-host from Cabin 6, we're going beyond Half-Blood Hill to take a closer look at the electrifying mythology of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief. Chapter 1, I Accidentally Vaporize My Pre-Algebra Teacher. Before we start this chapter, I just wanted to make a note to the listeners at home that Jack and I, as we have recorded this podcast, ended up recording the first episode in a slightly different format that deviated from how we ended up doing the rest of the episodes. In an effort to make things more consistent, we are going back and re-recording chapters 1 and 2 of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. So if there's anything that you find that is an incongruency in later episodes, that might be why. Jack, let's crack open the book. Starting chapter 1. One of the most fun things I think with these novels is the chapter titles are so much fun. I think that they really give off the atmosphere of this is Percy giving you his thoughts at each chapter. And so I always love just how fun and ridiculous they are across the series, starting here with him mentioning that he has accidentally vaporized his pre-algebra teacher.
Mm-hmm. I also really appreciate the chapter titles. And what else is, super fun? Diving back into this book, because it's been a super long time for me, and drinking in the vibes, even in just the first few paragraphs, is just so nostalgic. What a great hook for not only the start of a chapter, but for the start of a book and the start of a series. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. Like, what is that? What does a half-blood mean? Who is this person talking to me? And he talks about how dangerous it is and how it's really scary and you die in painful, nasty ways. And it's just this breaching of the fourth wall, right? It creates this sense of personability with Percy, this at this point character we have literally no idea who they are. But it's just such a distinct flavor that I think Rick really, really thrives with. And, it's something that at the very least I haven't really found successfully done in other series. I feel like Percy Jackson does this kind of stuff really well, and they're coming out of the gate doing it already exceptionally.
I
Mhm.
mean, there's no world in which you crack open this book, you read this first paragraph, and you don't like straighten up a little bit and go, "Oh, means business. It's scary.
Mhm.
It's fun." Like it's not really scary, but it's trying to put you on the edge of your seat from the first moment you crack it open, and I love that.
Stakes are high. Stakes are high. How? We don't know.
But they are. Oh, and you're so right. And I love the line, if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. Because
Mhm.
this book is designed for you to see yourself in it. When Rick
Yeah.
originally came up with the idea of Percy Jackson and wrote this novel, he was basing it largely on the experiences of his son, who struggled with both ADHD and dyslexia. And so this was a way for him to kind of explain those things away as heroic traits. And that's, I think, really special. And it's absolutely why you read this and you do, whether or not you have those traits, you have imagined that moment of heroism and being the demigod, monster slayer. And so when you see that line, stop reading immediately and you keep going.
Well, I didn't. So that's a problem.
Oh,
Did
you
you read
stop?
the rest of this, Connor?
I did. That was just the whole point.
What the hell?
No, what the Hades?
Yeah, I'm not doing that. You didn't feel anything stirring and stop? You didn't
Oh,
follow
I
the
definitely
rules?
felt things stirring. I think that's called nostalgia. So I definitely kept going.
Mm, that's true. But now, who is this mystery person warning us, saying, hey, be careful with what you're reading here? You could die in a horrible, painful way. It's Percy Jackson. He's 12 years old. He was a boarding student at Yancey Academy. He's a troubled kid.
Am I a troubled kid? Yes. Yes, you are, Percy.
Yes. And he agrees. He says, yeah. And then he kind of walks it back with, you could say that. But he is, though. And we're going to get into that a lot more within this first chapter. Here's what's interesting. Percy likes to complain. He describes his peers as, 28 other mental case kids. And they're headed to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So they're heading into Manhattan from upstate New York, which is already upstate New York is gorgeous. I lived there for 2 years. And so I struggle with this doom and gloom that Percy is setting us off with. He's going to a really cool place in a really cool city, and he's at a school in a beautiful part of the country where it's just him and nature. I feel like he's taking it for granted, personally.
Honestly, I hesitate to disagree. But for what it's worth, it does sound like, at least for this field trip, he's trying to look on the bright side. Mr. Brunner, aka Chiron, our Latin teacher, was leading the trip. So I had hopes. I appreciate that. Percy is at least trying to get excited for this. I've never actually been to the Met. It is one of the places that I want to go so badly. And we didn't go when we were in New York, but it's definitely on my list. And in particular, this chapter, I'll talk more about it later. There's something, an exhibit in particular, that I would really like to visit, and it's the stele that inspired all of Percy Jackson that Percy actually sees in this chapter. But for all of his complaining, you're entirely correct. He's checking out a beautiful museum and he's just complaining.
I need him to put a little bit more pep in his step. I need him to start actually trying to do a concerted effort to look on the brighter side of things.
Speaking of the bright side of things, Percy, like I said, for this trip, he is looking on the bright side. He tells us about what Chiron slash Mr. Brunner is like as a teacher. And I do really enjoy the description. Knowing that Rick Riordan was a teacher, I imagine this is how he sees himself. The cool teacher. He
Mhm.
describes him from a physical aspect. He's got the thinning hair, the scruffy beard, how he sits in the wheelchair, wears the frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. But I like the way that he's like, he told stories and jokes and let us play games in class. I bet that's just Rick tooting his own horn, being like, see, I was a cool teacher, guys. You didn't believe me.
Well, I think that's what everybody wants to be, right? And this is very like professorial for a
It
teacher
is.
for like middle schoolers. And as a brief aside, I know that it's mentioned here that Mr. Brunner has thinning hair. For all the faults of the Percy Jackson movie, of which there are many, 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 we could have a podcast all about that. For all its
Yep.
faults, Pierce Brosnan, that's Chiron. That's Mr. Brunner. He has a beautiful full head of hair. He's got flowing locks. And so that is going to take precedent in my mind for a mental picture of how Mr. Brunner and Chiron looks. Because Pierce Brosnan just knocked it out of the park with that role. That was like one of the few shining examples of where I think the movie might have actually done the book not only justice, but maybe even a little bit better.
Take that image for me. And now imagine a war hero taking the weapons he acquires on the battlefield and handing them to 12-year-olds. Because
Oh
I'm
yeah,
pretty
his
sure that's what
trophies of the
happens
dead.
right here.
Yes. Yeah, he's got this really awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons, which he definitely took off of corpses of people he or his compatriots killed.
I was going to say, notably Roman. Chiron runs Camp Half Blood, the Greek side of things. He interacts with all of the Greek demigods. It is eventually revealed that a lot of major wars throughout history are actually wars of the gods. In particular, that there was a recent occurrence somewhere around the two world wars when the Romans and the Greeks were in the past fighting. And that might imply that Chiron, having fought on the side of the Greeks, may have actually killed a few Roman soldiers, taken their Roman armor and weapons, and put them up in his Latin class for his students to see.
Oh yeah, and he's just happily showing them off. And you know what? If I was a veteran of World War II and I killed a lot of bad people, yeah, I'd probably show it off too. Why not?
Well, Percy's crimes are a little less showed off, or at the very least, you would imagine he doesn't want to show them off, because he's done some crazy shit, Jack. I mean,
Yes. It's attempted murder and homicide. Yeah.
yeah,
I
I,
would say various levels of domestic terrorism. He
I've read
shot a
this.
cannon at a school bus.
I have read this book quite a few times. And I feel like, it's the first chapter. You're kind of breezing through it. I haven't taken the time to really sit with some of the things that are said here. I don't think I've paid attention in the past to the fact that, yeah, he had this accident with a Revolutionary War cannon where he, quote, wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of
So
course
what
he
was he
got
aiming at?
expelled aiming. Yeah, what were you aiming at, Percy? And that's not
Uh,
even mentioning the time where he dunked his class in a tank of sharks. I sort of hit the wrong lever on the catwalk, and our class took an unplanned swim. How? How did you do that by accident?
here's what I want to know. What was the right lever?
No,
And he's not
seriously.
even telling us everything because there's a time before that. And he's just like, well, you get the idea. So think of the most cartoonish, heinous, sadistic stuff that you could do to a group of children on a field trip. And it sounds like Percy has done that multiple times.
And it's also established that Percy is already on probation. So what did he do at this school? I'm
Probably
curious
something
now.
that deserved probation, maybe even expulsion based on his track record. And they're just being nice.
I mean, gosh, I guess so, right? But I guess this school also has a low threshold for actually removing students because Nancy Bobbitt is also evil, our first little antagonist who won't actually ever come back up again after this chapter. But she is described as the freckly, redheaded kleptomaniac girl hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Ugh. Vile. I don't think you're supposed to eat peanut butter and ketchup sandwiches. I think they're supposed to be projectiles.
Oh, you're supposed to bully children with them. That's great.
Yes. If your parents gave you a peanut butter and ketchup sandwich, you would bully children. I
Well,
like
what
that's
I
the
would do
natural
is
next step.
I would look for an easy target. Somebody who is scrawny, somebody that looks like they've been held back several grades, somebody that was literally the only sixth grader with acne and the start of a wispy beard on their chin.
What a specific description.
I am not going to describe him as this next thing. I'm going to put that entirely on Percy. But this is my great transition into the introduction of Percy's friend Grover. Now, he is all of those things that I just said. I would be remiss not to mention, Connor, Percy, the person who is describing his friend, says he's scrawny, an easy target. He cries when he's frustrated, held back several grades. Whatever. All right. That's all well and good. That's fine. And then he just pimp slaps us with, on top of all of that, he's crippled. He's a cripple. What the fuck, Percy? Like, all right, I know 2005 was a different time, but dude, come on. You can have show a little bit more sympathy. You don't have to go around calling your friend a cripple to a bunch of strangers. We're the strangers here, Connor. This is our introduction to his friend.
It is. And Percy doesn't have a lot of friends.
I wonder why. Is it because he tries to kill them or because he calls them slurs?
Probably both, unfortunately. But for what it's worth, Percy is trying to be a good friend. And to your point, I'm gonna kill her, he mumbled.
I'm telling you, man, he is a Patrick Bateman psycho. He's crazy. He's prone to violence and he lashes out and he hurts those that are around him, sometimes with explosions and sharks. He is a dangerous person.
I gotta put out there, I do think that lines like this are what endear you to him as a protagonist. Him having zero chill, the Percy levels of, nah, man, I'm not dealing with that. I'm gonna turn around and kill her. From the get go. From chapter one, Percy just has zero patience, no tolerance for this nonsense. And Grover, the ever level headed one, is like, man, don't do it, don't do it. I'm just gonna keep eating the peanut butter and ketchup sandwich out of my hair. I mean, it's good one of them has a level head because I think Percy was about to do it. He'll even later in the chapter, he's like, I should have done it. I should have right then and there, I should have got up and socked her.
He's
Kind of wish he
spicy.
had. He is
And
spicy.
you know what? If anybody does earn the ire of a murderous psycho, it is Nancy Boba Fett. She sucks. She is a devil child. She's also a psycho. She is a sadist, and she should probably be locked up. She shouldn't be allowed to like roam.
Yeah. Kids here are all kind of troubled, but also apparently come from very well off families. So I guess she probably just comes from another such family that's just sweeping things under the rug left and right. Not that Sally isn't also doing that, apparently, with Percy's many crimes.
Now we're gonna put aside the ramifications of child psychopathy for but a moment. Mr. Brunner, he's leading the museum tour. He's riding up. He's showing all these cool Greek and Roman things. We're going in the galleries. There's marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. And Percy, actually showing a bit of deeper thought here, an appreciation for history. He says it blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000 years. That is really cool. And I know that you said you had never been to the Met before, Connor. I love the Met. I have been several times. I, yeah, no, it is my favorite museum. I have been to pretty much every museum in the National Mall in DC, and the Met still reigns supreme. It is so cool. They've got the craziest shit just on display for everybody to see. So, those of you that are listening that haven't gone to the Met, please, if you're in New York, make a point to go there. It's worth your time.
That is high praise coming from you, Jack.
I love
I
a museum.
You do love a good museum, and I do find it so fun that you have the mention of the quote really old black and orange pottery right here up front. I only find that fun and take the time to bring that up because obviously that is, or perhaps not obviously, that's the inspiration for the design of the t-shirts. It's meant to invoke that similar sort of style when you get to the Camp Half-Blood t-shirts that are the orange with the black lettering. And so I love that. And of course, Percy is talking about how Mr. Brunner gathers them around this 13-foot tall stone column with a big sphinx on top. And when we get to the myth section, that's where I've decided to leave the discussion of this stele. But this stele, which is depicted slightly differently in the novel from the real world one, is the actual real exhibit that Rick went to the Met, saw, and is a large part of the inspiration for the set of novels. And I think that is so cool. You can go, you can see it, you can look it up online, and you can actually see this thing that inspired all of this. And it's thousands of years old, 3,000 years old. I mean, that's really, really cool. We are
Yeah.
also introduced to Mrs. Dodds, of course, in this brief little aside here, with her black leather jacket and her badass attitude. I found it very funny that Percy thinks that she looks at him and thinks he is devil spawn, which is in the correct vein, but specifically, no, she thinks that you're the opposite of that.
That's true. But he is also Devil Spawn in the conventional sense.
In
He
the
is the
conventional
best.
sense, yes. In the literal sense, he would actually be God spawn.
That's true.
I also found it funny that right after that, I told Grover I didn't think Mrs. Dodds was human. Correct. Good take, Percy.
Okay, this bugs me. When Percy says that, he's like, "Yeah, I don't think Miss Dodds is human." Grover, he says, "You're absolutely right." So, is he supposed to be keeping the demigod stuff a secret or not? Because you can't have it both ways, Grover. You can't just drop something ominous like that, beat around the bush, and then be like, "We were trying to protect you. We wanted to pretend that it was all a hallucination." We'll get to that later. But this right here pisses me off, Connor. Why would you say that? Why?
I do like that this chapter establishes that Grover is a bad liar, because I just take this as just Grover's good natured instincts are immediately tell the truth. But that's what I get the impression of with Grover there. Percy says, she's not human, and he goes, you're not wrong, just instinctively.
Maybe. He really is just, I guess, not good at his job then. I don't know. Because that feels like dangling a turkey leg over Percy. It's like, ooh, what's that? What does this mean?
You mentioned that he's not good at his job because of this. I would actually argue the exact opposite, that this should probably make him better at his job. right? You would imagine that being honest with the demigods, like obviously that makes them apparently more visible to monsters if they start recognizing who they are. But I feel like telling them straight up, no, you should be afraid of her, she's not human, probably a good thing in the general sense.
I guess, man. Again, we'll get to it later to why that line feels wrong because they say we didn't want you to know. We were trying to put as much distance between you and the monsters as possible. And the more you know, the more dangerous it becomes. And that just feels like such a weird little grenade to throw. I personally have issue with them gaslighting Percy for as long as they did. They being Mr. Brunner Chiron and Grover. But they're not even playing by their own rules here.
Nope.
They're not even following their own agenda that they set. I think that's what gets me.
Yeah, as you said, just deliberately breaking one of their own rules.
It's the kind of thing where if I heard Grover say that, I'd be like, will you shut up? See how I'm moving this train along, Connor? See that?
Mm-hmm.
Which is exactly what Percy says to Nancy Boba Fett because she's laughing about a naked guy on the Stell, which honestly fair. I probably would as well. That's half the fun about seeing old things in museums is the naked people. Sue me, all right?
Well, alongside that carving of his name is Megacles, that naked guy, is also a carving of Kronos eating his kids that Mr. Brunner asks Percy to talk about, which is interesting because that's actually not an image on the original version of the still. That's an image that Rick made up just to throw in here so that he could add some exposition to the novel. Give us a little bit more backstory, which fair enough. Percy recounts the myth, and everyone kind of laughs at him for being good at school. Sounds like 2005 to
Yeah,
me,
I
actually.
was gonna say it sounds like being a middle schooler. You actually care? There's nothing dumber than caring. Don't you know that, Connor?
As an adult, I have learned clearly middle schoolers were right. Caring is overrated.
That's right. Be a leech, be a parasite. If somebody cares, it means that they are a cog in the machine and they should be laughed at. We need to bring back public scorn and ridicule.
I do find it funny that Mr. Brunner's like, now, children, what is the real world application of this thousands-year old myth? And all of them are like, and he's like, I'm waiting. Did none of you come up with the answer that all of this is real and monsters are going to eat you? Because you should have.
Which also a little frustrating. It's very clear these are like leading questions, but he doesn't explain the importance. These are 12-year-olds. Not only are you teaching them Latin, which is a whole other can of worms. Why are you teaching 12-year-olds Latin? It's a dead language. That doesn't matter. Why is that part of the curriculum? But also, myths are cool and like there's stuff you can learn from them. But if you were to look at a child, somebody who is prepubescent, and say, what are the ramifications of Kronos being chopped into a million tiny pieces by his children? They'd be like, I don't know, man, skibbity toilet, Fortnite. That's what kids are into, right?
I think you're right. Man,
It
yeah,
feels like a bit of unfair standards put on the whole class.
absolutely.
For Percy Jackson, still unfair because he has no clue what's happening. There are these unseen forces that are acting that, again, he doesn't know about, so why should he care as much? And again, Mr. Brunner, just similar to Grover, being really weirdly ominous.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I hate that so much. It just rubs me the wrong way. Either tell him what's going on and get him out of there, or don't say anything. Stop putting him in danger. Please.
So, to your point about contradictions, I actually do find that this is probably literally, again, directly contrary because we will be told later that names have power, right? We'll be told later
Yes.
that names have power and that the longer you don't know you're a demigod, the better. So, it is crazy to me that Mr. Brunner, Chiron, plans this trip and is like, all right, and now I'm going to tell you all about Zeus. I'm going to use his full name. This is Zeus, god of all the gods, and his dad, Kronos, above him, but now dead, so below him in Tartarus. And by the way, Chiron knows that Zeus thinks Percy did this. He's not stupid, which means he's just invoking the name of Zeus right here for all to hear.
That's also because, Connor, we later learned that names actually don't matter.
Yeah, names actually don't have
Actually don't
power.
matter. We just totally disregard that. So
He
weirdly, that is more in line with the rest of the series than the few chapters in this book in which the names actually do have power.
Jack, you're making some strong points. We get the mention of Mr. Brunner with a look that could have been 1,000 years old, which I do find just all of the little details where it's like, that's a good call, Percy, to be fun, but also like, do you think that's his demigod instincts just kicking in? Where he's just like, maybe he's wired to recognize ancient beings because those are dangerous, right? Often that's a god or a monster. So you think he's just looking into Mr. Brunner's eyes and something clicks. That's how I like to imagine it. Something in his demigod brain is just going, you're old, really old. And that's important.
That's a lot more whimsical than I thought about it. I thought it was just because Mr. Brunner just has wisdom that seems to be beyond his years. It literally is. But have you ever like met somebody where you look at them and you just think, "Wow, you have lived many, many lives
Yeah.
and have experienced many, many things." There's just this kind of stoic, kind of chiseled, maybe like glint in the eye that those types of people have. Now, does that mean that they are quite literally thousands of years old? Probably not. Maybe. I could be wrong. But I feel like that's just a characteristic that, it doesn't take demigod's power to sense. I think it's more just a sheer force of personality, will, and aura on the part of Chiron slash Mr. Brown.
I think that's also an entirely valid take. I mean, we know Chiron has been training demigods for so long, and demigods, generally speaking, are said to have pretty short lifespans, which means he's probably seen a lot of death and misery, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, he's also lived through every war. Like,
Yeah,
he doesn't just have 1,000 yard stare. He's got a
yeah.
million-yard stare. There's so many 1,000 yards that he's had to deal with.
And on top of that, it has made him, I think, numb to the circumstances as apparently, which by the way, the whole concept of the tournament days that he's got actually really cool. My teachers did that. I would have thought they were awesome. Bit weird when you consider that he's handing them Riptide. So he's just
Yeah.
casually whipping out Riptide and waving it around all the day.
Is it a little irresponsible to give children a lecture while brandishing a legendary item? Probably. But sometimes it takes a legendary weapon to get kids' attention. You do what you got to do as a teacher.
And with that, Percy gets ready to head outside and eat his lunch, while Mr. Brunner takes a long, sad look at the Stell like he'd been at this girl's funeral. And maybe, right? They talk about the huge storm that's brewing overhead and how the weather had specifically been weird since Christmas, which makes sense since the lightning bolt was stolen on the winter solstice during a trip to Olympus as like a little Christmas treat for the campers of Camp Half Blood. So that's when Luke actually steals the lightning bolt from Zeus.
Oh, spoilers, Connor.
I know.
Spoilers.
I know. Grover asks if Percy got detention, which like why is Grover assuming that Chiron would give Percy detention? Like,
I mean, again, maybe Chiron's a dick. Maybe he's just given him detention before. He clearly holds Percy to high standards, but again, it feels so unfair. Percy is not working with a full deck on many fronts, but on the most important one being the world of gods and monsters, he's got
yeah.
nothing.
I mean, even in the mortal world, he's been through 6 schools in 6 years. That's hard. That's
Connor, I'm not even a math person. I think that's a school a year.
it, I'm running the numbers here, Jack.
I
That
think
is
that's
one
how it
school
comes
per
out.
year.
I
It
think that's
does
how it
mean that
shakes
he
out.
didn't get kicked out of a school after kindergarten. So he did get to go kindergarten to first grade.
That's true, which is so surprising. I feel like Percy would be one of those kids that gets held back in kindergarten because he can't stop like biting people or like eating paste. It's a big social step going from kindergarten to first grade, and people grow and mature at different rates. I totally understand. But the idea that Percy was able to just ace kindergarten first try, doubt.
And I do also find it very fun that he's like, I was probably going to be kicked out again. Correct. Somebody make him the Oracle. These are great takes.
He's got crazy foresight.
Nancy, having eaten literally none of her lunch, dumps the rest of it in Grover's lap, which is just, why? But it's cool because it means that Percy gets to turn around and use his magic god powers, which not great, specifically not smart, because that
No.
results in Mrs. Dodds materializing next to them, perhaps literally, right? That use of the word materialize to me feels deliberate. She didn't appear or pop up or was miraculously right next to him as soon as it happened. She materialized.
Oh no, she spawned in.
Mm-hmm.
Also, shout out to the school counselor that had tried in vain to make Percy a more well adjusted person. He had told him a million times, count to 10, get control of your temper, which also, Mr. School Counselor, I'm sure that you're overworked. You're in a school filled with insane children. I'm sure you're underpaid too. Actually, maybe not underpaid. You might actually be well compensated
Yeah,
because you're at a
at this
private
private
academy
school.
in upstate
Mhm.
New York, where we later learn all the kids are rich and therefore their parents are super wealthy. Maybe, justify your wages by being better. Maybe if you're learning, hey, the count to 10 method does not work for this kid, try something else. I don't know, maybe shock therapy would work for him.
Oh my gosh, no. Zeus is going to try that. It won't work.
No, he's Percy's too far gone.
But no, this is the part where, after seeing the water grab Nancy and pull her into the fountain, obviously Mrs. Dodds, who is a Fury, Electo, is seeing this and she's immediately like, all right, I got him. I know what I need to know. That kid is the child of Poseidon. I'm going to go eat him now. I love that Percy is like, yeah, now she's going to take me to the gift shop and make me buy her a new shirt. Which,
Yeah, why would a kid think that? Why would his first thought be, "Oh, this adult is clearly looking at me thinking, ah, yeah, this 12-year-old is liquid. They've got some extra change. Go on and buy a new shirt."
I mean, it's because he's got an abusive stepdad, most likely. Honestly, scathing mostly of Gabe that that's what he thinks immediately.
Oh, that's fair. He's just always
Yeah.
seeing adults as knowing that he's got money on him and sniffing it out.
I can't think of a better reason that he's like, she probably wants my money. Like,
It's it's very sad, actually. I didn't think about that.
of course, Mrs. Dodds, completely different planet. Literally is just thinking all sorts of different things than Percy is, as there is, in fact, a triumphant fire in her eyes, perhaps a literal fire in her eyes, as if Percy had done something she'd been waiting for all semester. Because he has. Because she has been sitting here. Can you imagine? You're a Fury. You work for the gods, your job is to punish mortals, and then you get dumped into a classroom full of sixth graders and you just have to teach them algebra? Do you think that she was ever like, who am I? I am Electo. I am the Fury who is here to represent endless anger, and I am
Mhm.
sitting in a middle school full of angst, and I don't get to kill any of the children.
No,
I feel
no, no,
like that
no,
would
no,
make her
no.
upset.
Hold on. What better place to torture a bunch of snot-nosed kids than teaching them algebra, though? I'm just putting that out there. That
you know,
honestly might be her greatest environment is teaching all of these struggling children or, in vain teaching these struggling children algebra. Because even if they learn, it's still algebra and it hurts to do.
yeah.
Right as she's like, now they think they've done it. They're Sisyphus rolling the boulder up. They get it to the top. I finally figured it out. And then she's going to throw fractions into the mix or something. It's like, no, back to the bottom. You haven't even started, man. This is pre algebra. We're not even into the crazy shit yet. She might actually be reveling in it.
She probably is. She's real happy that Percy messed up. So, like, you know what? She probably has a great time tearing up their tests. She
Yeah.
uses the
And,
red pen. She grades in
that's
red
right.
Sharpie.
That's exactly right. She wants you to feel anger and frustration and sorrow at how bad you did.
Yup. And so she leads Percy back into the Met, I love that again, Percy gives Nancy his "I'll kill you later" stare. Keep working on that one, Percy. It's going to be useful for you. And then Mrs. Dodds is already up at the museum entrance. How'd she get there so fast? Wings? Probably wings.
Probably. Either that or, Percy's just really slow. He maybe got distracted along the way or something. That's not
Uh,
out of the question.
I was going to say, as it is mentioned specifically in the next paragraph, that Percy does have ADHD. Getting distracted, I can confirm. It happens a lot. We go on a lot of side quests. I can also confirm that your brain misinterpreting things such that you have what a school counselor seems to effectively describe as like hallucinations, not a symptom. Not a symptom.
Yeah,
I
I
can
think that's
confirm.
actually schizophrenia, which is a very
Yeah.
different thing from
Usually doesn't
ADHD.
onset at 12 either.
Usually doesn't. I probably not unheard of. I'm sure there are some cases, but yeah, not super likely. But if I were Percy and I was seeing a bunch of crazy stuff and people were telling me, no, it's just hallucinations because of your brain and your brain being bad. You know what? Honestly, I'd harbor a lot of resentment. I
Yeah.
might actually lash out just like Percy. And when I
Mm-hmm.
go to the school counselor and say, I'm just filled with such anger, what should I do? And they tell me to count to 10, yeah, I am going to blow up the school bus with a fucking Revolutionary War era cannon.
Percy says, I'll count to 10. I'll count down. At the end, there's going to be cannon fire.
Dang. That's one of the hardest lines you've ever said, Connor.
I love that that makes the list.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that was pretty good. You got to keep
Well,
that in your
thank
back
you.
pocket. In the
I will.
off chance somebody tells you to count to 10. You know who does need to count to 10?
Is it
Mrs.
Miss Dodds?
Dodds.
Yep.
Mrs. Dodds. Because she doesn't just have anger or madness in her eyes, she has evil. It is just described as evil. And
Factual.
Percy's saying, whoa, all right, she's not going to hurt me. I'll try harder, ma'am. And then thunder shook the building, which just adding to the atmosphere of terror for Percy. And then Mrs. Dodds starts speaking in like the royal we, or maybe she's referring to other people. We are not fools, Percy Jackson. Either way, terrifying. It's not good when people start talking about we and you don't know who else they're talking about. It might
Mm-mm.
be me, myself, and I, which is bad. That is not a good sign.
That's real bad.
It was only a matter of time before we found you out. Now, we could assume she's talking about Hades and the other Furies and what have you. But
Yep.
either way, it's not a good look. Percy is in, I would say, imminent danger.
Oh, yeah.
And
And to a
he's
12-year-old
thinking,
who's very out of the loop, even more so.
oh, yeah, no, he's playing poker with not a full deck and he's blindfolded. Like, it's not good. The cards and odds are stacked against him in so many different ways. It's bad. It's a tough situation, uphill battle for sure.
It is
And he's
not
thinking
good.
about, what have I done? Like, what have I done this time that's earned me the fury of this
I see
algebra
what you did
teacher?
there.
Thank you. And he's like, maybe she found my illegal stash of candy that I've been selling. So he does have money. Okay,
Yep.
that's good to know. Maybe they saw that he plagiarized. Plagiarism's no joke. Don't do this. But he just took the essay about Tom Sawyer from the internet. He never read the book. And maybe they're gonna actually make him read the book. Oh no. So his
Okay,
mind
hold
is
on.
racing.
Don't play around with the false own. That really would have been torture, okay? As someone who didn't read any of the books in class, ooh, not fun. You tell me to read them out of class, I still won't do it because you told me to. But if I just want to read them, I'll devour them. But if I'm told to, not gonna happen.
But that's just because you're a rebel.
I don't think that's what it is.
It's
But I
because you're
appreciate
you're
the
you're a
torture.
rebel without a cause, Connor. That's why.
I do like that. Thankfully, as all this is happening, you do have Grover and Mr. Brunner in the background paying attention. I just find it very funny that as soon as Electo is starting to lead Percy away, Grover is looking at Chiron like, please do something, please do something. He's
Like,
gonna
we gotta
die.
intervene. Yeah, something really
Yeah.
bad's gonna happen.
It's like, what do I do?
And
Are we about to just have another one die?
something really bad does happen because it's the weirdest thing. Her eyes began to glow like barbecue coals, and her fingers stretched, turning into talons, and her jacket melted into large leathery wings. She
Yeah.
wasn't human. She was a shriveled hag with bat wings and claws and a mouth full of yellow fangs, and she was about to slice me to ribbons. And then things got even stranger. Mr. Brunner diving into action. He wheels in his chair into the gallery. He's holding his pen up, hits him with the "What ho, Percy?"
Just
My
showing
response would have been "That ho," and pointed at the horrifying creature in front of.
facts.
But there's no time for quips because
No.
Mrs. Dodds is going for the kill. And she dodges. Here's where we get to see Percy's demigod slash killer instincts on display for the first time outside of the magic, with the water. This is where it's like his
Mm-hmm.
combat instincts are starting to come in.
Indeed.
Dodges, the talons are like super close. They just are miss his ear by centimeters. And he quickly snatches the ballpoint pen out of the air. One, great throw. Two, amazing catch. And when he catches it, it wasn't even a pen. It was a whole ass sword. The bronze sword. The one that Mr. Brunner's just been waggling around in everybody's face. To which Percy, as Mrs. Dodds is coming back for round two, Percy does the first thing that comes to his mind and kill her. Just swing the sword right at her. And it hit her in the shoulder and bisected her with great ease. And she disintegrated like a sandcastle and a power fan, specifically.
Which is
Vaporized on the spot.
just an incredible description. A sandcastle and a power fan? Can you imagine Percy just sitting here and he's just watched his math teacher just blow away in the wind?
Because he killed her. Which,
Yeah.
honestly, if I were Percy, I might be like, what a relief. No evidence.
I like that he's immediately like, my hands were trembling. My lunch must have been contaminated with magic mushrooms or something. Percy's first reaction is,
Which,
shit, who drugged me?
for for the company he keeps and his peers, and also just eating on Fifth Avenue, not out of the question. There's a lot of fucking
Yeah.
crazies out there.
This book was published in 2005 as middle grade fiction. It's just casual chapter 1 drug reference. How did this happen? Must have been magic mushrooms. It's like 2005. What are you up to, dog?
That they were getting high on magic mushrooms. You don't remember? Now, Percy, he's about to get gaslit so hard. He walks out. It's raining. Grover's still just chilling by the fountain. He's holding a paper museum map over his head. That's not going to help Grover. Nancy Boba Fett, she's standing there. She's soaked from her swim in the fountain, which, at this point wouldn't matter because it's raining. And then she says, "Oh, there you are. I hope Mrs. Care whipped your butt." And Percy's
Who?
saying, "Who?"
Who?
She says, "Our teacher, Mrs. Care." And Percy, he just blinks. He says, "We never had a teacher named Mrs. Care."
They
And
really did
Nancy
go to
just is
such
like,
lengths. They
"Oh,
even
yeah.
got the other students to gaslight him.
Oh, 100%. No, I feel like he was going insane." And so then he asks Grover, his friend Grover, "Mrs.
Yep.
Dodds, who's Mrs. Dodds?" And he says, "Who?" He puts on his best owl impression. "Who?" But he's pausing and he's not looking at him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like maybe Grover's messing with him, which of course he is. Mrs. Dodds absolutely was real. He knows exactly what's happening. And Percy calls him out. He's like, "This isn't cool. I'm freaking out right now." Zeus makes his presence known with another boom of thunder. But here's what sucks, all right? Grover, he sucks at lying. He might have cracked if Percy kept pressing him. But Percy, getting distracted very easily, sees Mr. Brunner. He's chilling under his red umbrella. He's reading his book. He goes over, he's pretending that nothing ever happened. He just looks up and says, "Ah, my pen. Could you give that back to me?"
The contrast. The contrast. Grover, bad liar, has to be like, who? Mr. Brunner,
Full
frown. Like,
sociopath.
yeah, you could just see his face. He's just so sincere and looks
Mhm.
mildly concerned. Percy, there is no Mrs. Dodds. And as far as I know, there has never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancey Academy. Dude, you're gonna mess this kid up for life.
What a dick.
Like,
That is my note for that entire section. What a dick. Seriously. Again, You can't have it both ways. The cat's out of the bag. The genie's out of the bottle. He
Yeah.
saw a Fury. He clearly remembers it. At this point, the jig is up. You gotta go. You're already in Manhattan, right? You're closer to Camp Half Blood now than if you were to head back upstate. Just go. Get out of there. Go,
Dog.
grab Sally or have Grover go to Sally. Chiron can take Percy, whatever. I just don't get it. And I understand that we are being nitpicky. This is supposed to be the hook. It's only
Yo.
chapter one. It's supposed to be intrigue. But like knowing what we know and seeing all of this, it's fucked up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I said if you just called it right here, like obviously the plot of the whole novel is kind of rendered moot, right? But the deadline is the summer solstice, which means that this moment, if Chiron just goes, "Ooh, Fury showed up," we should probably call it here and send you to camp, bud. If that happens, Sally is never taken to the underworld. Percy never thinks she's dead. He's never attacked by a minotaur. And they have presumably a full year almost to find the lightning bolt and get it back. They have so much more time to train Percy before his quest so that Annabeth doesn't have to at every turn be like, "Are you stupid? Why are you doing that?"
Wait, when does this take place? I thought that this was like early in that same year, so he wouldn't have a full year.
I guess that's true. I was thinking that it was in the fall semester, but you're right. It was after Christmas. So it would be
Eh,
early in the spring semester.
Still, he would still have
Either
more
way,
time than like the few weeks or whatever that
yeah,
he ends up actually getting.
they end up
Yeah,
having, yeah, like a week to do the whole quest. And if you just call it here, send him to Camp Half Blood, now you got like 3 months minimum to do a quest. Like,
also, here's the thing. Sally doesn't get taken. If that was the thing that like if Sally being taken was really the only possible thing that got Percy to go to the underworld, that's dumb. I refuse to believe that. I feel like once they get to Camp Half Blood, Percy gets his feet under him. He like is figuring out what's happening. He gets caught up to speed, and then they're like, "All right, break down what happened." Chiron would say, "Oh yeah, Electo was there. You know, a Fury. What the fuck was that about, Hades? I think we might have to go down to the underworld and see what's going on."
I'd like to talk to her manager.
Yes, exact precisely. Again, we're doing the cinema sins. Ding. This is actually blah, 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 right. And I know that that's really pretentious, but like, I just don't like how they're doing my boy right now. Pick a lane. Pick a
That
lane and
is
stick to it.
fair enough. Well, with all of those gripes and grievances, I think why don't we take a seat as the rain subsides on the steps of the Met outside with Percy and Grover and talk some myths, Jack?
I love it.
I figure that we should start with the myth that I found most interesting from this chapter. And it is not a Greek myth. It is what I would call a modern day myth. It's something that is near and dear to my heart. I mentioned it briefly that all of Percy Jackson was, in a certain sense, inspired by a real world place and a real world trip in 1999. Rick Riordan, at that point a teacher, takes a class, much like Mr. Brunner. You can really see the effect of the write what you know working out for him here. He takes his class to the Met and they see this stele. And for those of you at home, you can look it up. If you just look up Stell Percy Jackson or Stell Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan, I'll keep flipping back and forth. It's Riordan, but I've pronounced it as Riordan for years, so I need to work it into my head to do it right.
That's
Rick Riordan,
exclusively why I've called him Rick.
yeah, valid. Rick has actually written a piece on June 11th, 2024, so rather recently, on what spawned all of this. And you can find it, it's on the Met's website. And they have images of the exact stele, which is a grave marker that Rick saw. So in 1999, he took his class on this trip. 2 years later, in 2001, his son is struggling in school, and Rick's son has ADHD and dyslexia, notably two traits that Rick will then map onto demigods. Because his son is struggling in school, Rick wants him to feel good about the things that make him different and the things that make him struggle and reframe them. So he starts telling the story of Percy Jackson, this demigod who is much like his son. And I think that's such a powerful thing. 4 years later, the book is published, 2005, and the world gets Percy Jackson as we know it, which is so very cool. So I did a little bit of research on this stele just to dive a little bit more into what inspired all of this. So I mentioned earlier that there is actually no inscription of Kronos on the stele itself. The actual thing as a grave marker was for a guy named Megacles. So he is the larger of the two figures on the stele. There is the Sphinx on top, as described in the book, and there is a nude figure, a nude man, and that's Megacles. He's depicted that way because he is an athlete, and athletes in ancient Greece did have a certain degree of reverence. Nudity was seen as a way to signify heroism. So when Nancy Bobbitt was laughing at the guy for being naked, it is because he's heroic. And depicted on it as well is a younger female figure. Most scholars believe that this was probably a sister buried nearby, and that perhaps maybe they came down with the same illness or something, given that the depiction shows Megacles at having died at a relatively young age. He's also carrying something on his arm. It looks like a little swinging pendulum. What that actually is oil, because as an athlete, he needed to stay oiled up. Specifically,
So
it was
this
good
guy,
for his.
these athletes were walking around, they were naked and oiled up.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
how you knew they were heroes.
dude, let me just say, throughout this entire podcast, I need everybody to know I'm so heroic.
No, please leave it at home. That's why the video's not on. You guys
That's
wish
exactly
there was a
right.
video version.
I was gonna say, you guys gotta pay extra for that.
And so there's really not much more information that I can give you related to this stele that is notable. I suppose another small detail is that Megacles is also holding what is believed to be a pomegranate, which is a symbol of the underworld, which would make sense because, he's dead. And I think that this is a good point as well to talk about Rick's writing style just for a moment. Rick is someone who comes from a teaching background, but he was a teacher and a novelist before he wrote Percy Jackson. And before he did children's novels, he actually was a mystery writer. So throughout this podcast, I'm sure there will be many a reference to me going, and this is where you can tell that Rick is a mystery writer because he's setting it up. I'm going to keep doing that and I will regret none of it. It's so cool. There are so many little details where he sets things up, like the way that he mentions that Grover is looking to Chiron for help, and then that ends up being relevant later in the chapter. It's fantastic. All of the subtle details, I really like to imagine that they're deliberate.
I mean, they most certainly are. And that is, I should say, for all of the like gripes and nitpicking we did, this was still a really fun chapter. Being in the mindset of somebody who, let's say this is your first time reading it, this is a really intriguing, fun introduction into a world that only becomes more and more vibrant. I think it succeeds with hooking the reader. Now, does it succeed with sticking to its own rules? I mean, no, but I feel like I'm kind of willing to give it a pass. I don't know if you agree, Connor, but like I feel like
100%.
the most important thing is just getting people in the ride, saying, "All right, everybody, arms and legs inside the car. We're about to take off."
Oh, yeah. And I think to kind of play with that metaphor in a way that I'm sure is not intentional, Rick specifically adds in the depiction of the birth of Zeus and Zeus kind of defeating Kronos to the stele as like an additional thing for Percy to look at. I look at this chapter and honestly, it brings me nothing but joy and nostalgia. I love this book. I love going through and feeling like, ooh, this is where it all starts. It's so exciting. And you know what? Sometimes you have to add something just to get the ball rolling, just to get the exposition in there. And that's what I feel like we've kind of got
Yeah,
a few
you gotta get.
instances of.
Yes. There are certain points where you have to make a couple of concessions to just get to the really good meat and potatoes. And that's
Yep,
okay. That's what the first couple of chapters are going to be. But it moves at a clip.
it
Like I
does.
didn't feel like this chapter was boring. I didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome. I mean, we gained a lot of information and gleaned a lot about very key characters in a very short period of time, which is a huge testament to the writing.
Yeah, and
Rick
pretty
does,
seamlessly so.
oh yeah, he does a lot with a little. And, we'll talk about that more in the future, I'm sure. But he does such a good job at being concise while also invoking what he needs for like imagery. He does a much better job than me when it comes to like being verbose.
Oh yeah, there's hardly a wasted moment in this chapter.
Oh,
I mean, you mentioned that it moves at a clip, and it really doesn't stop. It is punch, 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 punch.
hmm
So, I think that is as good a place as any to move into our next myth, which I'll keep it short. Thankfully, I have a very defined myth here, so we don't have to talk about all the things of Zeus and Kronos. Let's just talk about the birth of Zeus and Zeus getting back and cutting up Kronos into a tiny bunch of little pieces. So the gods are not good at family. So this story, Jack, begins in the time before the gods, the time of the Titan. This story comes from Hesiod's Theogony. It is largely a place where we get a lot of foundational myths for Greek mythology and where things come from. And in this, we hear of how Uranus is going to die having been castrated by Kronos, who is obviously the big bad guy of this whole book. And after that, he goes on, he marries his sister Rhea, because that's what gods do, and they start having kids. However, before he castrated his dad, Uranus and Gaia gave Kronos a prophecy, because the Greeks love their prophecies. And he said, one of your kids is going to overthrow you and become the new king, just like you did to me. It is the cycle, it shall always become anew. And Kronos, being a titan or a god, is like, nah, fuck that shit. That's not how that works. And so he eats all of his children, as one does. And this, as you would expect, causes Rhea a lot of grief. Because every time she has a child, she has to watch them get eaten.
pause on that really quick. Just pull out. You know, I, if it's really that big of a deal with like kids overthrowing you, maybe you could just finish elsewhere, or wear protection or whatever, and you don't have to eat your kids and worry about it. But that
This
feels like
was the
maybe that's more of
pastime.
an indictment of Kronos or Uranus, right? Maybe he's just selfish. Maybe he's a
Maybe,
selfish lover and he
or
doesn't care.
perhaps, you know what, Jack? I think you're getting into something interesting. Perhaps this implies that the gods and the titans and all the other kind of immortal figures in this universe do not have a clear picture of the future. It would explain why there's such an emphasis on things like prophecy, because they can know all of what has happened before, but not the future. So they just don't know of the existence of condoms yet. Like they have to wait for
But
humans to
you
invent
don't
those.
have to be the oracle or a prophecy to know, hey man, if you're pouring the Bisquick, you're gonna make pancakes. It's not a hard concept to understand.
I don't know why, but that I've never heard that way of describing it before,
And you're
Jack. Thank
never
you.
gonna unthink of it. Like that is
Nope.
it's always gonna be how you imagine it now.
I'll
Sorry,
never be able to
everybody.
eat Bisquick again. So, anyhow, there he is, Kronos, being a guy, eating babies, as one does.
hmm
Obviously, this doesn't go over super well. So, Rhea, she sneaks off one of the babies and she has it hidden. The baby is raised in secrecy. And so, Zeus, as a kid, is raised by Gaia. Kronos never figures it out. They give him a rock instead, and he's like, oh, that's great. Neat. And he just believes that the rock is Zeus because I guess, lumpy baby, rock, same difference, you know?
Yeah, Zeus was an ugly fucking baby. That's my
Must have
takeaway.
been. Must have been. Looked like a rock.
hmm
And I do find this little detail to be oh so fun because I love whenever I can catch Rick in a contradiction, Jack. It doesn't happen often, and I will be pedantic about it. And I'm hard on him because I love him, because he has given me so much joy and information in my head that I can't resist poking at it. So Mr. Brunner slash Chiron says, Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine. which made him disgorge his other 5 children, who, of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. Now, the catch here is wine comes from Dionysus. Dionysus is a child of Zeus, and Zeus hasn't had him yet, which means that wine doesn't exist yet. So if you go and read Percy Jackson's Greek Gods, the later kind of supplemental material that's supposed to be there for, kids to go read, learn more about the myths themselves, not just learn kind of vicariously through the novels, but get kind of the first-hand account. In there, it's changed to be mustard and nectar. Nectar being the drink of the gods in the Percy Jackson universe. In some other versions, it is referenced, and I'm talking not in the Percy Jackson lore, I'm talking truly outside the Percy Jackson lore. In some other references, it is mustard and honey or honey wine. So the implication being that perhaps it was not grape wine yet, because again, Dionysus not born yet, but that the Greeks who have already been making like honeyed meads and things,
Hmm.
that is what Kronos gets drunk on before he pukes up his children. It's also slightly relevant, though not entirely so, to point out that mustard has been around Greece and Greek food since 3000 BC. And so most certainly would make sense as something that would be able to be used here. And as such, Kronos pukes up all the kids. Zeus takes the very same scythe of Kronos's that he used to castrate Uranus, his grandfather, and that Kronos used to castrate his grandfather. And he takes it and he cuts his dad into teeny little pieces and throws him into the darkest pit of the universe. The end.
And he never came back, ever.
And he never came back. Nothing could go wrong with that, I promise.
Hmm.
And so that's that other little myth that's referenced here. Nice, short. I think it's good. I think it's a good starting place. I don't think there's much here that we can draw in terms of like theme for the novel, other than it introduces us to all of our big players. It is
Yes.
purely expositing, hey, here's one antagonist, here's the other antagonist, here's why those two antagonists are fighting and why they're going to be antagonists. And also, that's kind of like a start for Greek myth. So that's kind of a start for our book. I like it. It
It's
feels
it's a
wet.
chapter of foundations. It's a chapter of
Exactly.
foundations. It's setting up pieces, filling out the board, and it does so very well.
I do think that that brings us to the end of this very first episode. Jack, I don't know about you, but the first chapter makes me so excited. It makes me so excited for what is to come. I have to ask, this book, but also in general, what are
Mhm.
you excited for going forward? I know we've talked about this off the podcast and other places, but put it out there. What are you excited for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I'm excited for is being reintroduced to characters that I hold very dear. I have these visions and like mental pictures of them in my head, but that's also been formulated after reading these, this series on top of the other series as a child and our D&D game that we did. So
Absolutely.
they've of that kind of mental picture that I have it's evolved and changed in a way that I don't know how much it deviates from like the actual source just because it's been so long, and I'm very curious to see if I am struck by the same characters that I was as a child, if any new ones stick out to me now that I'm reading this as like a proper adult. But yeah, just that kind of seeing friends that I haven't seen in a very, very long time and being like, do I remember you guys right? Like, did I just totally make this weird image in my head that is not true at all?
I like that. I really like that as a way to look at things. It's like going back and greeting old friends. When you bring up characters, it's not where I was going to go, but I do find it very probably rude that my first thought was, I wonder if Tyson will be as annoying the second time
Oh my
around.
god, dude. I
I remember
forgot
not
about
liking
Tyson.
him.
I also remember really not liking Tyson, and it was mainly because he was always described with like peanut butter chunks in his teeth and like spitting everywhere. It was just
Yeah.
really gross.
That'll be an
Yeah,
interesting character to come back to.
yeah, we don't have to deal with him for a bit though.
I will say, I am also very excited to just revisit these books, taking a really nice close look at them and enjoying each like page of it in a way that sometimes I feel like I really blitz through, just looking to get to the good parts. This is
Mhm.
forcing me to slow down, and I really like that. I think it's super fun. And on top of that, I like that it's going to have me go back to some of the books that I don't always read, right? We're going to do the Kane Chronicles. The Kane Chronicles I've reread probably twice after my original reading. I think if I'm remembering correctly, but it's definitely much more in your boat where it's like I haven't read those in nearly as recent of memory. So I'll be really excited when we get to those because we're going to do everything in chronological order, which means that we're going to go Percy Jackson and the Olympians 1 through 5, then Kane Chronicles, then Heroes of Olympus. So that should be really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're looking that far ahead, dude, I think I read the first book in the Kane Chronicles, maybe the second one, but I remember like nothing about them, and I definitely didn't read all of them. So that'll be like new territory for me.
They're really good. I genuinely think that we'll have a lot of fun because I don't think I've remembered nearly as much of them either. And so I think that will be one where you and I kind of uncover it together, especially
Hmm.
because I also don't know nearly as much about the Egyptian side of the mythology. So that'll be really fun to dive into as well.
Yeah, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We've
We
still
are.
gotta be re-immersed in the world of Percy Jackson, and I am violently, maliciously excited to delve into it with you.
Me too. So I suppose with that, we will see you all next week, or hear you all, or you'll hear us for chapter 2.
See ya.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to leave it a review and give us a follow so you never miss an episode. And until next time, this has been Notes from the Oracle.